Imagine turning the chaos of your life into a source of unexpected peace and personal growth. It sounds impossible, doesn't it? We've all faced moments when everything seems to be falling apart, the storm of life so overwhelming that it feels like there's no way through it. But what if I told you that ancient Zen wisdom holds the key to not just surviving, but thriving in a world that is constantly changing, a world where stability feels fleeting? Zen Master. This ancient Zen secret isn't a quick fix or a magic solution. It's not about avoiding the inevitable storms of life. Instead, it's about training ourselves to stay grounded, even when the world around us feels like it's spiraling out of control. It's about learning how to thrive in the face of uncertainty by embracing the In Zen, we are taught that everything, our happiness, our peace, our sense of fulfillment, is found in how we relate to the present moment. It is not the situation itself that causes stress or suffering, but our attachment to our expectations, our resistance to what is happening right now. The storms we face in life are inevitable. They are a natural part of the human experience. But how we respond to them is where our true power lies. Can we find stillness in the chaos? Can we learn to float calmly down the river of life, even when it's turbulent? This question brings us to the story of Alex, a young entrepreneur who was about to experience the power of Zen in a way he never expected. Let me share his journey with you. Alex was a brilliant young coder, full of energy, ambition, and a passion for technology. He was convinced that he had created something revolutionary, a social media app unlike any other. He imagined it would change the way people interacted online. Although a new platform that would bring people together in a way never before seen. He poured everything he had into it. His time, his energy, his savings. He stayed up late into the night, coding, designing, and refining, working tirelessly to bring his vision to life. The idea consumed him. It was his dream, his future, and he believed in it with every fiber of his being. When the app was finally ready, Alex launched it with great fanfare. He posted it across social media, reached out to influencers, and even garnered some early attention. His friends and family cheered him on, convinced that this was going to be the big break he'd been working for. He had done everything by the book. The perfect marketing plan, the ideal product, the right audience, and then nothing. The response was not what Alex had hoped for. His app, despite all the hype, fell flat. The market just wasn't interested. There were no users, no downloads, no buzz. His creation, which he had worked on so relentlessly, seemed to be lost in a sea of other apps. It was a painful blow. The silence was deafening. Instead of the success he had envisioned, Alex faced a cold reality. His app was not the next big thing. It was just another failed idea in a world full of them. For Alex, this felt like rock bottom. The months of sleepless nights, the financial investment, the relentless effort, everything had seemed to culminate in a moment of nothingness. He had truly believed in his ideas, and now, to have it fail so completely felt like a personal defeat. His self-worth, tied so closely to the success of his startup, seemed to be crumbling with it. He began doubting himself, questioning whether he had the skills to succeed or if he was cut out for the world of entrepreneurship at all. Alex's initial reaction to the failure was despair. He questioned everything: his judgment, his abilities, his future. The dream he had worked so hard for seemed to have turned to dust in his hands. There was a part of him that wanted to give up entirely. Maybe starting a business wasn't for him. After all, maybe he should just get a regular job and leave all this behind. But then, after a few weeks of brooding, something interesting began to happen. Alex started to notice the way people were using social media and the kinds of apps they were drawn to. He saw a gap in the market, a need that wasn't being met. People were looking for something different, something that his app didn't quite provide. Instead of stubbornly clinging to his original idea, Alex decided to pivot. He took the core technology of his failed app, repurposed it, and began to develop a new product that addressed this unmet need. This shift in perspective was a turning point. It wasn't just about salvaging his startup. It was about embracing the failure and using it as an opportunity to learn. Rather than seeing the failure as a dead end, Alex saw it as market research. His app had failed, but that failure had shown him what people really wanted. Instead of seeing his previous efforts as wasted time, he viewed them as a valuable learning experience. It was a process of trial and error that allowed him to discover a better, more viable solution. Alex's new app, born out of his previous failure, took off. Within a year, he had turned his fortunes around and was running a successful tech company. His new business was thriving, and he felt a deep sense of fulfillment. His initial setback, which had once seemed like the end, had been the very thing that helped him learn, grow, and adapt. He was no longer attached to his original idea. He had allowed it to evolve, and in doing so, he had created something far more successful than he had imagined. What was the key to Alex's transformation? It wasn't just his technical skill or hard work, although those were certainly important. The key was his ability to let go of his attachment to his original plan, to accept the reality of the situation, and to see the opportunity hidden within what had appeared to be a failure. His ability to embrace impermanence, the idea that everything, even his perfect business idea, is subject to change and evolution, allowed him to adapt and move forward. Zen wisdom teaches us the power of non-attachment, the ability to release our fixed expectations and be open to the natural flow of life. Alex practiced non-attachment by not letting his self-worth depend on the success of a single venture. He didn't define himself by the outcome of his app. Instead, he focused on the process of learning and adapting. He was mindful of the world around him, paying attention to the needs of the market, rather than stubbornly clinging to his preconceived notions. Most importantly, Alex cultivated acceptance. He acknowledged the reality of his failure without resistance. Instead of fighting against the situation or wallowing in self-pity, he accepted that things had not gone as planned and used that information to grow. In doing so, he found peace in the midst of uncertainty and transformed what could have been devastating defeat into a stepping stone toward greater success. Like Alex, we all face moments of uncertainty, moments when things don't go according to plan. But it is how we respond to those moments that determines whether we sink or rise. When we can detach from our rigid expectations, embrace the impermanence of life, and accept what is happening in the present moment, we free ourselves to adapt and grow. Zen teaches us that thriving in an uncertain world isn't about holding tightly to our plans or resisting change. It's about learning to flow with life, to see failure as an opportunity for growth, and to trust that we are always evolving into something better, even when things don't go as we expect. When we face failure, especially after investing so much of ourselves into a project, it's easy to become discouraged and to feel like we've hit a dead end. Alex had poured his heart and soul into his app. He believed in it with every part of himself. The failure felt personal, like a reflection of his inability to succeed. But the most powerful moments of transformation often come in the aftermath of such crises. The key is to look beyond the immediate pain and to find the lesson buried within the wreckage. For Alex, that lesson didn't come all at once. At first, there was only the bitterness of failure, the gnawing feeling of disappointment. He had worked so hard, and yet the market didn't care. The people weren't interested. It was easy to feel like all that effort was in vain. But then, in the quiet aftermath of his app's failure, Alex started to shift his perspective. He began to notice how people were interacting with social media in ways he hadn't anticipated, what kinds of apps they were using, what features they found useful, and where there were still gaps in the market. Instead of clinging to his original idea, which had already failed, Alex allowed himself to pivot. Pivoting in the world of startups is a common and necessary practice. It means acknowledging that your original idea might not work and being willing to adapt, to change direction based on what the market actually needs. It's not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of strength. It's an acceptance of reality and a demonstration of the flexibility required to thrive in an unpredictable world. When Alex pivoted, he didn't abandon everything he had done. Instead, he used the core technology of his failed app, the part that worked, and applied it to solve a completely different problem. The moment Alex made the decision to pivot, he found the freedom to let go of his attachment to his initial idea. The Zen concept of non-attachment became his guiding principle. Alex had been deeply attached to his original vision. It was personal. But in his pivot, he detached himself from that attachment, recognizing that success wasn't about clinging to one idea. It was about solving real problems and being adaptable. The Zen practice of non-attachment doesn't mean not caring. It means not letting your identity be tied to one outcome. It means remaining open to new possibilities, even when those possibilities seem far removed from your original intentions. Once Alex was able to let go of his attachment, he became more open to new ideas and possibilities. His app had failed, but it had provided him with valuable feedback. Instead of seeing his failed app as a wasted effort, he saw it as essential market research. It had shown him exactly what people didn't want. And more importantly, it helped him see what they did need. Rather than clinging to a dream that had passed, he embraced the opportunity to create something better. Pivoting is an important skill in both business and life. We can all find ourselves locked into one version of success, one path, one idea, thinking that if we just push hard enough, it will work out. But Zen teaches us that life doesn't always go according to plan. Sometimes the path we're on isn't the one we're meant to walk. Zen encourages us to release the attachment to a fixed outcome and to trust that change is part of the process. When we remain flexible and adaptable, we allow space for new ideas and opportunities to emerge. In Alex's case, the pivot led him to a completely different market, but the core of his success remained the same: his ability to stay present, to observe, and to be open to change. It wasn't about abandoning his work, but about using his past experiences to shape a more viable future. This ability to pivot is what turned his failure into a success. The lesson here is that failure is not the end. It's often the beginning of something new. When we can detach from our expectations and our rigid attachment to specific outcomes, we make room for new possibilities. In the case of Alex, that new possibility was a product that met a genuine market need, one that his original idea had missed. It's a lesson that can be applied to any aspect of life: relationships, careers, or personal growth. Instead of resisting the changes that life throws at us, we can embrace them as opportunities for growth, learning, and transformation. Zen teaches us that everything is impermanent, and that impermanence is not something to fear. It's something to embrace. When we release our grip on what we think should be, we open ourselves up to the beauty of what can be. Alex's success wasn't defined by the failure of his first apple. It was defined by his ability to adapt, learn, and grow. His journey was a testament to the power of non-attachment, mindfulness, and the flexibility to pivot when necessary. If we apply this principle of non-attachment to our own lives, we can navigate the uncertainties and inevitable setbacks with greater ease. Instead of seeing failure as a sign of our inadequacy, we can see it as a necessary step in the process of growth. Instead of holding on tightly to our original ideas, we can use them as a foundation for something better, something that will truly work. Alex's pivot was a turning point in his entrepreneurial journey. It wasn't just about the success of his new app, it was about his transformation as a person. He learned that peace doesn't come from holding tightly to our plans, but from the willingness to let go and trust in the process of life. When we let go of attachment to specific outcomes, we open ourselves up to new possibilities that can lead us to greater success, fulfillment, and peace. Alex's transformation wasn't just about the change in his business strategy or his newfound success. It was about how he changed his perspective on failure, uncertainty, and success itself. What enabled him to pivot and rise from the ashes of his initial failure was a shift that mirrors the wisdom of Zen. It's not about avoiding failure, resisting uncertainty, or clinging to our own expectations of how things should be. It's about understanding the impermanence of life, cultivating mindfulness, and releasing attachment. In Zen, there is a profound teaching that speaks to the nature of impermanence. Everything is in constant flux. Nothing stays the same forever. Success, like failure, is transient. But in our society, we often get caught up in the idea that success is permanent, that we must achieve and hold on to it. When things go wrong or plans fall apart, it feels like everything has been undone. But Zen teaches us that change, even when it's painful or uncomfortable, is a natural part of life. Alex's ability to pivot, to shift gears when things weren't going as planned, was rooted in an understanding of this impermanence. He didn't see his failed app as a permanent failure. Instead, he saw it as an evolving process, a lesson learned, a stepping stone to something better. He had learned to release his attachment to a single idea and to embrace the reality that everything, even his cherished vision, was subject to change. This understanding of impermanence freed him from the grip of disappointment and allowed him to see the opportunity hidden within what appeared to be a failure. Zen also teaches the power of mindfulness, the ability to be present and fully engaged with the moment without judgment. For Alex, mindfulness wasn't just a tool for relaxation or stress management. It was a mindset that allowed him to truly see the needs of the market, to notice what wasn't working, and to let go of preconceived notions. Mindfulness helped him detach from his attachment to a specific outcome and instead observe the world around him with clarity and focus. He didn't need to panic or make rash decisions. He simply needed to observe, listen, and respond with an open mind. In the same way, mindfulness can be applied to any challenge we face. When we stop reacting impulsively and take a step back to observe, we can often see things with more clarity. In moments of failure or uncertainty, it's easy to get swept up in emotions, fear, frustration, self-doubt. But mindfulness teaches us to acknowledge those feelings without being controlled by them. It teaches us to observe our thoughts and emotions, and then to choose our response with wisdom and compassion. The transformation Alex experienced wasn't just about adopting a new business strategy. It was a spiritual shift. By embracing impermanence, non-attachment, and mindfulness, Alex was able to move beyond his initial failure, see the opportunity it presented, and create something even more successful. His journey is a reminder that transformation isn't just about taking action, it's about shifting our mindset, embracing change, and letting go of rigid expectations. One of the greatest challenges we face in life is learning to let go. We often cling to our plans, our desires, and our outcomes, thinking that if we just push hard enough, we will make things happen. But Zen teaches us that the more tightly we hold on, the more we resist the flow of life. True transformation comes when we release our grip on what we think should be, and instead allow ourselves to flow with life's natural rhythm. This isn't always easy. Our minds naturally seek control. We want to know what's coming next. We want to have a plan. We want to feel secure. But Zen shows us that the only true security is found in the present moment. When we stop fighting against the uncertainties of life, when we stop trying to control everything, we begin to experience a profound sense of peace. In business, As in life, we will face setbacks. There will be moments when things don't go as planned, when the outcomes we expect don't materialize. But how we respond to those moments will determine our success and growth. Like Alex, we can choose to see failure not as an obstacle, but as a lesson, an opportunity to pivot, to adapt, and to grow. We can choose to practice mindfulness, to stay present and engaged with the reality of the situation, and to let go of attachment to the outcome. Zen teaches us that we are not defined by our failures or successes. We are defined by how we navigate the ups and downs of life with grace, humility, and mindfulness. By embracing impermanence and non-attachment, we can learn to move through life's uncertainties with greater ease and resilience. Just as Alex did, we can turn setbacks into opportunities, failures into lessons, and chaos into a path for growth and transformation. The Zen secret to transformation lies not in avoiding challenges, but in learning to flow with them, to embrace them as part of the journey. Life is full of change, full of uncertainty, but when we practice mindfulness, acceptance, and non-attachment, we find that we can navigate the unknown with peace, clarity, and confidence. The journey of transformation is not about avoiding the storms, but about finding calm in the midst of them. It is about trusting that, even in the most difficult moments, we can find a way to adapt, learn, and grow. Alex's story shows us that with the right mindset, we can not only survive the chaos of life, we can thrive in it. One of the most powerful lessons Zen teaches us is the practice of non-attachment. This doesn't mean giving up on your goals, your dreams, or the things that matter to you. It means letting go of the need to control the outcome, of clinging to specific expectations, and of tying your identity to any one outcome. Non-attachment is about being present in the moment, accepting what is, and allowing things to unfold without resistance. Alex's journey was a perfect example of this. When his first app failed, he could have clung to the idea of it being the perfect solution. He could have continued to push forward, stubbornly trying to make it work despite the market's disinterest. But instead, Alex demonstrated non-attachment. He let go of the attachment to his original vision and allowed himself to see things as they really were. Instead of resisting the reality of his failure, he accepted it and used it as a stepping stone to something better. Non-attachment in Zen is about understanding that nothing is permanent and that holding on to something too tightly can cause suffering. When we attach ourselves to an outcome, we often do so because we believe it will bring us happiness, security, or fulfillment. But Zen teaches us that true happiness comes from within, not from external sources. When we can release our attachment to specific outcomes, we open ourselves up to new possibilities and deeper satisfaction. For Alex, his success wasn't in the app that initially failed, but in his ability to let go of the attachment to that app and pivot towards something better. Non-attachment didn't mean he was giving up or being passive. It meant he was being adaptable, recognizing that the world was constantly changing and allowing himself to change with it. The ability to detach from the need for a fixed outcome gave Alex the freedom to pursue a new opportunity, one that aligned more closely with the market's actual needs. This concept of non-attachment can be applied to every area of life, whether it's relationships, career, or personal growth. Attachment often causes suffering. We become attached to people, to ideas, to things, and when they change or don't live up to our expectations, we experience pain. But non-attachment allows us to be present with what is, to accept life as it comes, and to respond with clarity and wisdom. Consider the attachment many people have to their careers. We often tie our self-worth to what we do for a living, whether we are successful or not, whether we have achieved our professional goals. But in Zen, our worth is not defined by our work. It is defined by who we are in the present moment. When we release our attachment to external measures of success, we can find peace in the process of work itself, rather than in the end result. Non-attachment also plays a crucial role in relationships. It doesn't mean we stop caring about others or that we become indifferent to their needs. It means that we don't base our happiness or self-worth on the behavior or approval of others. When we release the need for others to fulfill our expectations, we create space for true connection, one that is based on mutual respect, understanding, and love, not on need or dependence. The process of letting go isn't always easy. We are conditioned to attach ourselves to outcomes because we believe they will give us control or security. But in reality, attachment only leads to frustration and disappointment when things don't go as planned. Zen teaches us that life is in constant flux, and the more we try to hold on to the way things should be, the more we resist the natural flow of life. Non-attachment isn't about detaching from life. It's about accepting the impermanence of everything and finding peace in the midst of change. Letting go of attachment opens us to the richness of the present moment. Instead of constantly looking ahead, striving for a future goal, we can find peace in simply being where we are. Alex's ability to detach from his original idea allowed him to be fully present with his new project. Free from the constraints of his old plan, he wasn't stuck in regret or fear about the future. He was open to the possibilities unfolding before him. In our own lives, we can practice non-attachment by letting go of the need for things to go a certain way. This doesn't mean we stop setting goals or striving for what we want, but it does mean that we release the need for a specific outcome. When we focus on the journey, on the process of growth, rather than the final destination, we can find peace no matter where the path leads. We become more flexible, more adaptable, and more resilient in the face of life's uncertainties. By practicing non-attachment, we learn to trust the process of life. We understand that the ups and downs, the failures and successes are all part of our growth. Just like Alex, we can use the challenges we face as opportunities to learn and grow. Instead of viewing setbacks as failures, we can see them as stepping stones on the way to something better. Zen reminds us that life is fleeting, and holding on too tightly to any one thing only creates suffering. But when we release our attachments and embrace the flow of life, we can move through the world with greater peace, wisdom, and joy. Non-attachment doesn't mean giving up. It means releasing the need to control and trusting that life will unfold as it is meant to. It's a practice of acceptance, mindfulness, and trust that can transform our relationship with the world and with ourselves. One of the most challenging aspects of life is learning to navigate uncertainty. In a world that values control, certainty, and stability, uncertainty can feel like a threat. We are taught to plan, to strategize, and to create clear paths for success. But Zen wisdom teaches us that life is inherently uncertain, and this uncertainty is not something to fear, it is something to embrace. Consider the way Alex navigated the uncertainty that followed the failure of his first app. At the time, everything seemed up in the air. The future was unclear, and the path forward was anything but guaranteed. Yet, instead of clinging to his old idea and trying to force it into success, Alex embraced the uncertainty. He didn't know what would happen next, but he trusted that there was an opportunity hidden within this moment of chaos. Instead of viewing uncertainty as a problem, he saw it as a space for discovery, a place where new ideas could emerge. Zen teaches us that uncertainty is not something to resist, but something to allow. When we stop fighting against the unknown, we open ourselves to new possibilities. Life is constantly changing, and no matter how hard we try to control it, we can't stop that flow. However, by accepting the ebb and flow of life, we become more resilient. We learn to adapt to the circumstances rather than becoming paralyzed by them. Alex's pivot wasn't about having all the answers or knowing exactly what would happen. It was about being comfortable with uncertainty, about trusting the process even when the outcome wasn't clear. Instead of trying to create certainty in a situation that was inherently uncertain, Alex embraced the unknown and allowed it to guide him. He recognized that uncertainty wasn't a barrier to success, it was the catalyst for it. He took what was uncertain and used it as an opportunity to innovate, to think differently, and to create something new. This lesson can be applied to our own lives. How often do we find ourselves anxious about the future, trying to control every aspect of our lives to ensure that everything goes according to plan? How often do we worry about what might go wrong, what might not work out? Zen teaches us that this anxiety comes from our resistance to uncertainty. We fear what we don't know, and we try to hold on to what we think is certain. But in doing so, we limit our potential for growth and transformation. Instead of resisting uncertainty, we can choose to embrace it as an opportunity for discovery. When we stop fearing the unknown, we give ourselves permission to explore new possibilities, to take risks, and to learn from the unexpected. This approach isn't about being reckless or throwing caution to the wind. It's about cultivating a mindset of openness, a willingness to adapt, and a recognition that the unknown is not something to fear, but something to embrace. Uncertainty is not just a feature of business or entrepreneurial endeavors. It's a part of every aspect of life. Whether it's our careers, our relationships, or our personal growth, uncertainty is inevitable. Things don't always go as planned, and sometimes we have to face challenges we didn't anticipate. But Zen reminds us that Uncertainty is not a sign of failure, it's an invitation to grow. It's an opportunity to learn more about ourselves, to develop resilience, and to discover new paths that we may not have considered before. In relationships, for example, we often find ourselves clinging to expectations of how things should be. We may worry about where a relationship is headed, what the future will look like, and whether we're making the right choices. But Zen teaches us to let go of the need for certainty in relationships. By doing so, we allow ourselves to be more present, to enjoy the journey, and to connect with others without the burden of trying to control the outcome. This mindset of non-attachment and acceptance opens up space for deeper, more authentic connections. Similarly, in our careers, we often find ourselves anxiously planning for every step, trying to map out a perfect trajectory. But life rarely follows a linear path. Instead of focusing solely on the destination, we can learn to embrace the journey by accepting that the future is uncertain and not something we can predict with precision. We give ourselves the freedom to explore, adapt, and grow in unexpected ways. The key to embracing uncertainty is not about making the unknown feel less scary. It's about shifting our perspective so that we see uncertainty as an opportunity rather than a threat. Just as Alex did, we can use uncertainty as a space for creativity, innovation, and self-discovery. When we stop clinging to a fixed outcome and accept that life is fluid, we become more adaptable and more able to flow with the changes around us. Zen teaches us that life is constantly changing. Embracing that change, rather than resisting it, is the path to peace. Uncertainty, instead of being a cause of stress, can be a source of growth and creativity. It is the fertile soil from which new ideas, new experiences, and new opportunities grow. So, what if, instead of fearing uncertainty, we saw it as a chance to discover something new? What if we allowed ourselves to be curious, to explore, to fail, and to learn from those experiences? What if we accepted that the unknown is not something to be feared, but something to be embraced with open arms? By doing so, we free ourselves from the anxiety and stress that often accompany uncertainty, and we open ourselves to the endless possibilities that life has to offer. The beauty of uncertainty is that it forces us to let go of our rigid plans, our attachment to specific outcomes, and our need for control. When we allow ourselves to flow with the currents of life, instead of struggling against them, we find peace in the present moment. In uncertainty, we can find freedom. Maria was the kind of person you might meet and instantly recognize as selfless, someone whose entire life seemed devoted to the well-being of others. For years, Maria had been the primary caregiver for her aging mother, who was suffering from Alzheimer's. She had taken on this responsibility with a love and dedication that only a daughter could have. But as the days turned into months and the months into years, Maria's role became increasingly overwhelming. Her days were filled with a constant cycle of caregiving, feeding her mother, ensuring she took her medication, providing constant supervision to prevent her from wandering, and attending to her emotional needs. Maria's life had become consumed by this unyielding responsibility, and Despite her deep love for her mother, she began to feel trapped. The work was physically exhausting, emotionally draining, and unrelenting. Her personal life, her friendships, and even her own hobbies had been put on hold. The more Maria gave to her mother, the more she neglected her own needs. She had convinced herself that being a perfect caregiver meant sacrificing her own happiness and well-being. She put everyone else first: her mother's needs, her mother's health, her mother's comfort, until one day Maria realized that she had nothing left for herself. Her health was deteriorating, her energy was spent, and yet she continued to pour everything she had into this role that defined her. She felt guilty for her feelings of resentment, as though wanting time for herself was selfish. But the truth was that she was slowly burning out. It was during one of these dark moments that Maria decided to speak with a therapist. She had been feeling the weight of her situation for so long, but had never allowed herself to admit that she was struggling. In her mind, being a caregiver meant sacrificing everything, even her own needs. She expected to find a quick solution to her frustrations, to somehow feel better about the role she had taken on. But the therapist said something that shifted her perspective in a way that changed everything. Maria, you can't pour from an empty cup. If you don't take care of yourself, you won't be able to take care of your mother. That simple statement, which seemed so straightforward, was a revelation for Maria. It opened her eyes to a truth she had been avoiding. She had been so attached to the idea of being the perfect caregiver that she had neglected the most important thing, herself. She had convinced herself that being self-sacrificial was noble, that giving all of herself was the only way she could truly care for her mother. But in reality, she had been running on empty, and the more she gave, the less she had to give. Zen teaches us the importance of non-attachment, not just in terms of material things or fixed outcomes, but also in terms of expectations about who we are supposed to be and what we are supposed to do. For Maria, the attachment to the ideal of the perfect caregiver had created a prison for her. She was so attached to the idea that caregiving meant sacrificing herself that she couldn't see the harm it was causing. By releasing this attachment, Maria began to understand that caring for herself was not selfish, it was essential. The Zen practice of non-attachment doesn't mean abandoning responsibilities or becoming indifferent to others' needs. Instead, it is about letting go of rigid ideas about how we should be. Maria had been clinging to the notion of being the perfect caregiver, which was an ideal based on external expectations rather than the reality of what she could sustain. Non-attachment allowed Maria to recognize that her well-being was just as important as her mother's. She couldn't continue to care for her mother if she didn't first care for herself. With this new insight, Maria started taking small steps to reclaim her life. She hired a part-time caregiver to give her some respite. For the first time in years, she had a few hours each week where she didn't have to be on duty. She joined a support group for caregivers, where she could share her feelings and receive encouragement from others who understood her struggles. She began carving out small pockets of time for herself, even if it was just 15 minutes a day to read a book or take a walk. Slowly but surely, Maria began to regain her sense of self. This wasn't an easy shift for Maria. She had been so deeply attached to the idea of self-sacrifice that it took time to let go of that rigid expectation. But in doing so, she discovered a new sense of balance. She wasn't neglecting her duties as a caregiver. She was simply recognizing that her own health and happiness were part of the equation. When she took care of herself, she had more energy, more patience, and more compassion to give to her mother. She approached her caregiving responsibilities with renewed vigor, not because she was giving more of herself, but because she had learned to replenish herself as well. Maria's story is a beautiful example of how non-attachment can lead to a more fulfilling and balanced life. By letting go of the need to be a perfect caregiver, by releasing the attachment to an ideal, she was able to be a better caregiver, one who was more present, more patient, and more compassionate. In her case, non-attachment didn't mean abandoning her responsibilities. It meant acknowledging her limitations and embracing her own needs. In Zen, non-attachment is not about removing ourselves from the world or from our duties. It is about recognizing that we don't need to be defined by our roles or our expectations. We can be fully present in whatever we do, but we must also make space for ourselves. Non-attachment is about releasing the need for perfection and finding peace in the reality of our lives. For Maria, the shift came when she allowed herself to be imperfect, to not have all the answers, and to take time for herself. She learned that her own happiness and well-being were not separate from her responsibilities. They were interconnected. By letting go of the idea of being the perfect caregiver, she found a deeper connection to both herself and her mother. As you reflect on Maria's story, consider the areas of your own life where you may be clinging to expectations or ideals that are draining your energy or causing you to feel stuck. What would happen if you let go of these attachments and allowed yourself to find balance? How can you cultivate non-attachment in your own life so that you can show up more fully in the present moment, free from the weight of rigid expectations? Maria's breakthrough didn't happen overnight, and it wasn't a grand, dramatic moment. It was small, subtle, and profound, like a shift in the wind that you barely notice. But that changes everything once you do. For years, Maria had clung to the idea that caregiving meant sacrificing her own needs. She thought that to be a good daughter, a loving caregiver, she had to give everything of herself. The therapist's words were a revelation because they shattered that rigid belief. You can't pour from an empty cup wasn't just advice. It was a profound truth that unlocked a new way of thinking for Maria. When we live in a constant state of self-sacrifice, we can start to lose sight of our own worth. We may feel that our value comes from what we do for others, not from who we are as individuals. This was Maria's reality for a long time. She believed that if she wasn't constantly giving, if she wasn't always available for her mother, she wasn't doing enough. But in doing so, she was unknowingly disconnecting from herself. She was unable to nurture the very thing that would allow her to care for her mother better, herself. The moment Maria recognized this, she began a journey of self-rediscovery. It wasn't about abandoning her role as a caregiver. It was about integrating her own well-being into her daily routine. She could still care for her mother deeply, but she also needed to care for herself both emotionally and physically. Maria's shift wasn't just in her actions, it was in how she viewed herself. She was no longer just a caregiver. She was Maria, a woman with her own needs, dreams, and desires. In Zen, the practice of mindfulness encourages us to be present with ourselves, to acknowledge our feelings and needs without judgment. When we become so consumed by taking care of others or fulfilling external expectations, we often ignore our own needs. But the truth is that we cannot truly care for others if we are not in a place of balance and strength ourselves. Maria's awakening to this truth allowed her to let go of her attachment to being the perfect caregiver and to accept that taking care of herself was not only okay, it was necessary. Maria's acceptance of her limitations and her willingness to step back and allow herself rest marked the beginning of a new chapter in her caregiving journey. With the part-time caregiver in place, Maria was able to step away from the role for brief periods, allowing herself time to recharge. She wasn't abandoning her mother. She was honoring her own need for self-care so that she could be present and effective in her role. By creating space for herself, Maria found she could approach her caregiving responsibilities with a renewed sense of patience and empathy. She wasn't overwhelmed by burnout. She was energized by the balance she had created. Zen teachings on non-attachment show us that it's not the roles we play or the labels we carry that define us. It's our connection to the present moment and the acceptance of who we are without the need for perfection. Maria's willingness to release her attachment to the idea of being the perfect caregiver helped her break free from the expectations she had set for herself. She learned that imperfection is not only acceptable, it is essential for growth. Her journey of self-rediscovery also led her to understand the impermanence of caregiving. Her role as a caregiver was not permanent. It was subject to change, just as everything in life is. Zen teaches that everything is in flux and nothing remains the same. Maria had once believed that she had to give everything to her mother without question, but now she understood that both she and her mother were part of a larger process of change. Caregiving wasn't a static role. It was a dynamic experience that evolved with each day. Embracing this impermanence allowed Maria to view her caregiving with greater compassion for herself and for her mother. This realization gave Maria a new perspective. The responsibility she had felt as a caregiver was still there, but it no longer felt like a burden. It was part of her life's journey, and it could be handled with grace and presence rather than exhaustion and resentment. By accepting the temporary nature of her situation and releasing her attachment to an ideal of perfection, Maria found freedom. She didn't have to sacrifice herself for others, nor did she have to be perfect. She could simply be present, doing her best in each moment, and that was enough. This shift in perspective wasn't just about caregiving, it was about life itself. When we stop holding tightly to rigid expectations, when we accept the impermanence of everything, we are able to live with greater ease and clarity. We stop measuring our worth by external standards, and instead, we find value in the process of living itself. With all its ups and downs, Maria's journey shows us that by releasing attachment, we can find peace in the present moment and grow in ways we never imagined. As you reflect on Maria's story, think about the expectations and attachments you might be holding onto in your own life. What are the things you feel you should be doing? The roles you feel you should be fulfilling? How can you begin to detach from these expectations, to embrace imperfection, and to allow yourself the space to live authentically? Non-attachment is not about abandoning responsibility. It's about releasing the burden of unrealistic expectations so that we can live more freely and with greater peace. In Zen, we are reminded that peace is not found in perfection, but in acceptance. Accepting that life is full of change, that our roles are fluid, and that we are not defined by any single moment or outcome allows us to live with a sense of freedom and ease. Maria's journey of self-care and acceptance of impermanence is a beautiful example of how non-attachment can lead to greater peace, joy, and fulfillment. As Maria embraced the practice of non-attachment and began to care for herself, she found that she was not only able to perform her caregiving duties with more energy and patience, but she was also able to reconnect with parts of herself that had been long neglected. She began carving out small moments for herself, something as simple as a walk in the park, a cup of tea in silence, or an afternoon reading her favorite book. These moments, though brief, allowed her to restore her sense of self and to remember who she was outside of her role as a caregiver. Before, Maria had believed that being a good daughter meant giving up all her personal desires and placing her mother's needs above her own. But now, she realized that her ability to care for her mother depended on her own well-being. By taking care of herself, she became a better caregiver, more present and compassionate. She started to feel like her old self again, reconnected to the things that made her feel fulfilled. The balance she had regained allowed her to approach her caregiving role with more love and understanding rather than with a sense of martyrdom. One of the most powerful aspects of this transformation was Maria's newfound ability to set boundaries. She had always been so immersed in her caregiving responsibilities that she had lost sight of where her needs ended and her mother's began. But by practicing non-attachment, Maria learned that setting boundaries was not selfish, it was necessary. Boundaries allowed her to maintain her own well-being while still being there for her mother. She began to speak up about her needs, ask for help when necessary, and recognize when she was pushing herself too hard. This process of reclaiming her life didn't happen all at once, but little by little, she began to take control of her time and energy. Through this journey, Maria also began to appreciate the small, simple moments of connection with her mother. Before, caregiving had been a constant, overwhelming task, something she had to do, but that didn't always feel meaningful. Now, by accepting her limitations and taking care of herself, Maria found herself more present with her mother. She no longer saw her caregiving duties as a burden, but as an opportunity to create meaningful moments together. to enjoy her mother's company and to cherish the time they had. The Zen concept of mindfulness played a crucial role in Maria's transformation. Mindfulness is about being fully present in the moment, without judgment, and without rushing through life. In her practice of mindfulness, Maria was able to approach her caregiving with a calm and clear mind, allowing her to respond with patience and kindness rather than frustration. She stopped seeing the caregiving process as a long list of tasks to be completed and instead embraced it as a daily opportunity to engage with her mother and the present moment. Maria's story highlights a fundamental principle of Zen: the importance of balance. Balance is not about perfection or doing everything right. It is about finding harmony between our responsibilities and our needs, our obligations and our desires. It's about recognizing that we cannot give to others unless we first give to ourselves. By reclaiming her own life, Maria was able to give more of herself to her mother without depleting her energy or sacrificing her own happiness. Zen teaches us that everything is impermanent: our roles, our responsibilities, our emotions, and even our relationships. By embracing impermanence and non-attachment, Maria learned to navigate her caregiving role without clinging to fixed expectations. She understood that life and caregiving is a dynamic process that evolves over time. This understanding allowed her to release the idea that there was one perfect way to be a caregiver and instead embrace the reality that there would be ups and downs, challenges, and moments of growth. Maria's acceptance of her own needs and limitations didn't make her less of a caregiver. It made her a better one. By letting go of the attachment to being the perfect caregiver, she freed herself to be more human, more present, and more compassionate. Zen teaches us that true care for others comes from a place of wholeness and balance, not from self-sacrifice and exhaustion. Maria's story is a powerful reminder that self-care is not a luxury. It is an essential practice for living a meaningful and fulfilling life. As you reflect on Maria's journey, think about the areas of your own life where you might be clinging to unrealistic expectations. Where are you sacrificing your own well-being for the sake of others, believing that you must always put others first? How can you begin to practice non-attachment in these areas, allowing yourself to find balance and peace? By letting go of the need to be perfect and embracing your own needs, you can begin to navigate life with greater ease, grace, and compassion. In Zen, we are reminded that balance is not about being perfect, it's about being present, accepting the impermanence of life, and recognizing the interconnectedness of all things. By practicing mindfulness, non-attachment, and self-care, we can learn to navigate life's challenges with greater resilience and joy. Maria's journey demonstrates that the key to lasting peace and fulfillment is not in perfection or self-sacrifice, but in acceptance, balance, and self-compassion. When we allow ourselves to let go of rigid expectations and embrace the fluidity of life, we find freedom, the ability to care for ourselves, to set boundaries, and to be present in the moment is the path to true happiness and fulfillment. Maria's journey of reclaiming her life was a profound example of how non-attachment can transform our approach to even the most challenging responsibilities. Caregiving, by its nature, is a demanding and self-sacrificial role. It requires a deep commitment to the well-being of another, often at the expense of one's own needs. But as Maria learned, non-attachment doesn't mean abandoning her caregiving duties. It means approaching them with a sense of balance and presence, not burdened by rigid expectations. Zen teaches us that attachment to a fixed idea, whether it's about how we should behave, what we should accomplish, or how we should feel, leads to suffering. It's the expectation that we must be perfect in a particular role that causes the most stress and frustrations. This is especially true in caregiving. Many people who take on the responsibility of caring for others, especially family members, feel a deep sense of duty. They may feel that they must give up everything for the sake of the person they care for, often neglecting their own needs in the process. But Maria's story teaches us that true caregiving doesn't come from self-sacrifice. It comes from self-awareness. When we let go of the attachment to an idealized version of ourselves as caregivers, we allow space for grace and understanding. Maria had been trying to embody the perfect caregiver, believing that she must constantly give and never take. She attached herself to the belief that her role as a caregiver defined her value. But by practicing non-attachment, Maria learned that her worth was not defined by the number of sacrifices she made. Instead, her worth was intrinsic, and her ability to care for her mother depended on her own well-being. Non-attachment in caregiving is about releasing the idea that we have to be everything to everyone all the time. It's about acknowledging our limits and recognizing that we can't pour from an empty cup. When we are too attached to our role, we begin to lose sight of the bigger picture. We become consumed by the responsibilities, and our sense of self fades away. But when we let go of that attachment, we open up the space to care for ourselves as well, which ultimately makes us more effective and compassionate caregivers. Maria's decision to hire a part-time caregiver was a small but powerful act of non-attachment. By allowing someone else to help, she stopped trying to control everything and accepted that she didn't have to do it all alone. This simple act of letting go of the need to do it all allowed Maria to regain her energy and sense of self. She learned that caregiving doesn't require perfection. It requires presence, patience, and the ability to adapt. Zen teaches that the path to peace is not through constant striving or fulfilling unrealistic expectations. It is through accepting what is, letting go of the need to control, and allowing life to unfold naturally. Maria's experience shows us that the path to being a better caregiver and a better person isn't through self-sacrifice, but through balance and mindfulness. When we let go of attachment to a fixed outcome, we can engage with the present moment, respond with compassion, and find peace even in the midst of demanding situations. One of the most profound aspects of non-attachment is its ability to create space for compassion. When we are not weighed down by rigid expectations of how we should act, we are able to respond more mindfully to the needs of others. We stop seeing caregiving as a burden, but as an opportunity to connect and support the person we love in the most genuine way possible. Maria's ability to practice non-attachment didn't mean she became less dedicated to her mother. In fact, it deepened her commitment to her caregiving role. She could now approach her duties with a sense of openness and presence. Rather than feeling overwhelmed by the weight of perfection, her compassion for herself allowed her to offer more compassion to her mother. This is the essence of non-attachment. By letting go of the need to control and perfect, we make space for deeper, more meaningful connections. This practice is not limited to caregiving. It can be applied to any role we take on in life, whether it's being a parent, a partner, a friend, or a worker. Non-attachment teaches us to approach our responsibilities with mindfulness and flexibility. We stop clinging to rigid expectations and instead focus on what we can give in the moment. By doing so, we allow ourselves to remain present, compassionate, and open to new possibilities, even when things don't go as planned. In our fast-paced world, we are often told that we must strive for perfection in every role we play. But Zen invites us to let go of that pressure. We are reminded that perfection is an illusion, and the real beauty of life lies in its imperfections. When we stop trying to force outcomes and instead accept what is, we find peace and joy in the process. Non-attachment, therefore, isn't about disengagement. It's about engaging fully with the present moment, without being burdened by our expectations of what should be. Maria's story is a testament to the power of non-attachment. By letting go of the need to be the perfect caregiver, she created space for herself, for her mother, and for the relationship they shared. She found peace not by denying her responsibilities, but by embracing them with an open heart and a flexible mind. Through non-attachment, Maria was able to discover a deeper sense of self, a renewed commitment to her caregiving role, and a more fulfilling life. As you reflect on Maria's journey, ask yourself, what expectations or attachments am I holding onto in my life? How can I begin to release these attachments and find balance, whether it's in caregiving, work, relationships, or personal growth? Non-attachment offers a path to greater peace, presence, and connection. Letting go of rigid expectations and embracing impermanence can lead to a life that is full of grace, flexibility, and joy. Word count 322. Waiting for continue. Download as audio. Zen teaches us that nothing in life is permanent, and it is through embracing this impermanence that we find true peace. Everything, whether it's our emotions, our relationships, or even our possessions, is in a constant state of change. The very nature of life is fluid, always evolving, and Zen asks us to accept this fluidity instead of resisting it. Maria's journey exemplifies this idea perfectly. She had to learn that caregiving, like everything else, is temporary. The caregiving role that consumed her for so long was not permanent. It would evolve, and eventually, she would have to let go. Her mother's condition would progress, and the needs would change. By understanding the impermanence of her role and her situation, Maria could release the attachment to a fixed idea of how things should be. She learned to approach caregiving as a dynamic process, one that required her to be flexible, adaptable, and present, rather than clinging to an idealized version of what it meant to be the perfect caregiver. Impermanence is not something to fear. In fact, it is the nature of all things. And when we accept it, we can live more freely. In our everyday lives, we tend to resist change, especially when it feels difficult or uncomfortable. We fight against the inevitable, trying to hold on to what we know, what is familiar. But Zen reminds us that it is through embracing change that we grow, that we evolve, and that we become more aligned with the flow of life. Think about how often we resist change, especially when it comes to our work, relationships, or personal growth. We want stability, we want certainty, but life is rarely stable, and certainty is often an illusion. When we attach ourselves too strongly to our expectations, we set ourselves up for disappointment, because the only thing we can count on is change. Zen encourages us to embrace change, to accept impermanence, and to find peace in the ever-shifting nature of life. For Maria, accepting the impermanence of her caregiving role gave her the freedom to let go of the need to control the situation. She was no longer trying to maintain the status quo or fulfill an unrealistic ideal. Instead, she was able to be present with her mother in each moment, responding to her needs as they arose, without the burden of perfection or the fear of what might come next. The Zen teaching of impermanence also relates to how we view our own growth and personal development. We often expect to have everything figured out, to have a clear path forward, and to never make mistakes. But life doesn't work that way. We are always evolving, always changing. Growth happens through the ups and downs, the successes and failures, and the moments of uncertainty. When we embrace the impermanence of our own journey, we stop measuring our progress against fixed expectations, and instead, we appreciate the process itself. Consider how Maria's caregiving evolved over time. What began as a role defined by sacrifice and perfectionism shifted into one of balance and acceptance. As she learned to embrace the impermanence of her situation, she was able to approach caregiving with more compassion for herself and for her mother. She no longer felt trapped by her responsibilities. She felt empowered by her ability to adapt and respond to each changing moment. The love and care she gave to her mother were no longer based on the idea of self-sacrifice, but on presence and flexibility. Zen encourages us to approach all aspects of life with the same awareness of impermanence. When we accept that nothing lasts forever, we can let go of our attachment to fixed outcomes and instead find peace in the present. Life's beauty lies in its fluidity, in its constant state of change. It's in the moments of transition, the moments of uncertainty, that we discover who we really are and how we can grow. Think about the moments in your own life where change was inevitable, where you couldn't control the outcome. Perhaps it was a job change, a relationship shift, or even the death of a loved one. In those moments, did you resist the change, or did you embrace it? Did you fight against the impermanence, or did you allow it to shape you? Zen teaches us that by accepting the impermanence of all things, we allow ourselves to flow with life rather than against it. The Zen practice of impermanence is not just about accepting change when it happens. It's about cultivating the awareness that everything is in flux. When we live with the understanding that nothing lasts forever, we become more appreciative of the present moment. We stop taking things for granted and start to savor the fleeting beauty of life. This awareness allows us to let go of the past and not fear the future, knowing that life is always evolving. And with that evolution comes new opportunities, new experiences, and new lessons. Maria's story is a perfect example of how embracing impermanence can lead to profound growth and peace. By accepting the impermanence of her caregiving role, she was able to release her attachment to a fixed idea of what it should be. She was able to be present with her mother in each moment, to approach her responsibilities with a sense of balance, and to find peace in the process rather than in the outcome. Maria's journey teaches us that when we accept the impermanence of life, we can let go of our expectations and embrace the beauty of the present moment. As you reflect on this, think about where you might be resisting change in your own life. Where are you holding on to outdated expectations, rigid plans, or unchangeable circumstances? How might accepting the impermanence of your situation free you to live more fully in the present? Zen reminds us that everything is temporary, and in that very truth, we find the freedom to live with ease and grace. To understand the depth of Zen's teachings on impermanence and non-attachment, we can look to an ancient Zen parable, the story of the stonecutter. This simple tale offers profound insights into the human experience of striving, comparing ourselves to others, and the quest for satisfaction. It also serves as a powerful reminder of how attachment to external ideals can obscure our path to true contentment. In this story, a stonecutter is working tirelessly on a massive rock, each blow of his hammer feeling like an insurmountable task. He wishes to be something more, something grander. He looks out into the world and sees the wealth of a merchant passing by, carried in a sedan chair surrounded by servants. And he thinks, if only I were a merchant, life would be so much easier. I would have everything I desire. At that moment, he imagines himself as the merchant, enjoying all the luxuries of wealth. But as the merchant continues on his journey, he passes the king's procession, resplendent in royal robes and surrounded by honor and respect. The stonecutter, now imagining himself as the king, reflects, if only I were the king, everyone would bow to me. I would be invincible, untouchable. But even as the king enjoys his power, the sun shines down mercilessly, and the king struggles under its intense heat. The sun is stronger than I am. The king thinks, if only I were the sun, I would be more powerful. And so, the stonecutter imagines himself as the sun, radiant and dominating. But as he shines brightly, a dark cloud moves across the sky, blocking his light. The cloud is more powerful than I am. The stonecutter reflects, if only I were the cloud, I could block out the sun whenever I wanted. And then, as the cloud drifts across the sky, a fierce wind blows, scattering it in all directions. The stonecutter, now imagining himself as the wind, thinks, "The wind is more powerful than I am. If only I were the wind, I could move everything in my path." But as the wind blows across the mountains, it encounters a massive rock, unyielding and immovable. The rock remains steadfast, unaffected by the wind's strength. "The rock is more powerful than I am," the stone cutter reflects. "If only I were the rock." And in that moment, the stone cutter, now back in his original form, finds himself once again standing before the massive rock, hammer in hand. His journey through all these forms reveals a simple yet profound truth. No matter what role we take on in life, we are always confronted with something or someone stronger, more powerful, and more influential. The quest to become something else, something more, never brings the satisfaction we expect. In this story, the stone cutter is constantly searching for fulfillment by comparing himself to others. He seeks to become what he perceives as the most powerful or respected first, the merchant, then the king, the sun, the cloud, and the wind. But no matter where he turns, he finds something more powerful than himself. The story highlights how the desire for something different, for something more, often leads to a cycle of comparison and dissatisfaction. The stone cutter's longing for power and prestige blinds him to the richness of his own life and his own unique power. This story mirrors the struggles many of us face. We often look around at others and think that if we could just be like them, our lives would be better. We compare ourselves to others, believing that their success, their wealth, their relationships, or their status would bring us happiness and fulfillment. We chase external markers of success, thinking that they will give us the satisfaction we seek. But just like the stone cutter, we find that no matter where we look, there is always something or someone more powerful, more successful, or more revered. And in our pursuit of these external ideals, we miss the beauty and strength of what we already have within ourselves. Zen teaches us that true contentment does not come from comparison, nor does it come from chasing after ideals or external accomplishments. It comes from recognizing the power we already possess in the present moment. The stone cutter's journey is a metaphor for the human condition, the constant striving for more, the pursuit of external validation, and the belief that happiness lies in becoming something other than who we already are. But Zen reminds us that true peace comes not from becoming someone else, but from fully embracing and accepting who we are right now. When we release the need to compare ourselves to others and stop chasing external markers of success, we can begin to appreciate the unique qualities and the strengths that make us who we are. This is the essence of non-attachment. The stonecutter's realization that the rock is the most powerful force he encountered is a symbol of the importance of grounding ourselves in the present moment. Just like the rock, we must learn to be steadfast in who we are, not swayed by the winds of comparison or the desire to be something or someone else. Non-attachment is not about abandoning ambition or desire. It is about releasing the need for validation from external sources and finding fulfillment in the journey, not the destination. It is about recognizing that we are enough just as we are, When we let go of the need to compare ourselves to others or to seek approval from outside, we open ourselves to a deeper sense of peace and contentment. The story of the stone cutter invites us to reflect on our own lives. Where are we searching for fulfillment outside of ourselves? What comparisons are we making with others? And how are those comparisons affecting our happiness? Zen teaches us that true power lies not in becoming something we are not, but in embracing who we already are. By practicing non-attachment, we can release the need for comparison and find contentment in the present moment, appreciating the strength and beauty of our own unique journey. The story of the stone cutter, like many Zen teachings, invites us to reflect on our search for fulfillment. Just like the stone cutter, we often find ourselves looking outward, comparing ourselves to others, and seeking fulfillment in external achievements, possessions, or recognition. We may think that if we had more money, a better job, or a more perfect relationship, then we would finally feel complete. But Zen teaches us that this external pursuit of fulfillment is a trap, a never-ending cycle that only leads to disappointment. As the stone cutter discovered, no matter what he became, there was always something more powerful, more impressive, or more successful than he was. In his search for fulfillment, he was constantly comparing himself to others, believing that happiness and satisfaction lay in becoming something other than what he was. But the true lesson of the stone cutter's journey is that fulfillment is not found in external comparisons. It is found in accepting and embracing who we are, right here and right now. How often do we fall into the trap of comparison? We look at others and think, if only I had their life, their success, their relationships. We believe that someone else's life holds the key to our own happiness. But this constant striving for more, this constant comparison, only creates dissatisfaction. We are never fully content because there is always someone else to compare ourselves to. And in that pursuit, we lose sight of the fact that we are already whole, just as we are. Zen teaches us that true fulfillment comes not from chasing after an idealized version of success or trying to be someone we are not, but from embracing the present moment and the person we are in that moment. True contentment comes from within. It is not something we can find outside of ourselves. When we let go of the need to compare and the desire to constantly achieve, we can begin to experience true peace. We start to realize that we are enough, just as we are. The stonecutter's journey teaches us that fulfillment is not a destination, but a way of being. It is about being present with our own lives, accepting our limitations, and appreciating the beauty of the process. It is about letting go of the need for perfection and recognizing that our imperfections are what make us human, what make us unique. When we stop comparing ourselves to others and stop seeking validation from outside, we can find fulfillment in simply being who we are. This lesson is especially important in a world that often promotes the idea of constant achievement. Society tells us that success is the ultimate goal, that we must always be striving for more money, more status, more recognition. But Zen reminds us that this external pursuit is not the path to true happiness. True fulfillment comes from the present moment, from acceptance, and from releasing the need to be something else. As you reflect on your own life, ask yourself, what are you seeking fulfillment in? Are you constantly comparing yourself to others, believing that their success will bring you happiness? What would it look like to stop seeking validation from external sources and to find contentment in who you are right now? Zen invites us to stop chasing after fulfillment and instead to recognize that it is already within us. By practicing non-attachment, we can release the grip of comparison and external validation. We can begin to see that fulfillment is not something that is earned, but something that is realized when we let go of our attachment to a fixed outcome. Like the stone cutter, we can stop searching for fulfillment outside of ourselves and start appreciating the richness of our own lives. Right here and right now, the search for fulfillment is a universal human experience. We all want to feel satisfied, content, and at peace with ourselves. But Zen teaches us that fulfillment is not something we can find by chasing after external markers of success. It is found in the present moment, in acceptance, and in letting go of the need for comparison. When we embrace who we are, just as we are, we open ourselves to a deeper sense of peace and joy. We can finally stop searching and start living. Now that we've explored the stories of Alex, Maria, and the stone cutter, we can begin to reflect on how Zen principles, non-attachment, mindfulness, and impermanence can be applied to our own lives. It's one thing to learn about these concepts intellectually. It's another thing entirely to embody them and live them day by day. Applying Zen in our daily routines doesn't require grand gestures or dramatic changes. It's about small, consistent shifts in perspective that can lead to profound transformation. The first principle to reflect on is non-attachment in your own life. Where are you holding on to fixed ideas about how things should be? Do you find yourself constantly comparing your life to others, thinking that happiness lies in achieving certain milestones or acquiring specific things? Zen teaches us that non-attachment isn't about disengaging from life or abandoning our dreams. It's about recognizing that life is constantly changing, and holding too tightly to any one outcome leads to suffering. Instead of clinging to a fixed idea of success, happiness, or security, non-attachment invites us to embrace the present moment and to let go of expectations. Think about the areas of your life where attachment might be holding you back. Are you attached to a certain outcome in your career? Are you expecting your relationships to always meet your needs in specific ways? Are you clinging to past successes or failures and allowing them to define who you are today? By recognizing where attachment has taken root, you can begin to practice non-attachment in those areas. You don't need to abandon your goals or stop caring about what's important to you. Instead, you can let go of the need to control the outcome and allow life to unfold as it will. Next, consider mindfulness, the practice of being fully present in the moment. In our busy, fast-paced world, it's easy to get caught up in the hustle and bustle, constantly rushing from one task to the next, without ever truly pausing to experience the present moment. Mindfulness asks us to slow down, to fully engage with whatever we are doing and to bring our awareness to the here and now. Whether it's washing dishes, walking through the park, or having a conversation with a loved one, mindfulness encourages us to experience life as it unfolds without distractions or judgment. To apply mindfulness in your daily life, try to bring your attention to the present moment whenever you can. Notice the sensations in your body, the sounds around you, the emotions that arise. When you find your mind drifting to the past or future, gently bring your focus back to the present. Mindfulness doesn't require special circumstances or deep meditation sessions. It can be practiced anytime, anywhere, in the midst of your regular routine. It's about cultivating a deeper awareness of your experiences, your thoughts, and your feelings. The third Zen principle to explore is impermanence, the understanding that everything is in a constant state of change. Impermanence can be difficult to embrace, especially when we face challenges or loss. We want things to stay the same, to remain stable and predictable. But Zen teaches us that change is the very nature of life. And by accepting impermanence, we can let go of the fear and resistance that often accompany change in your own life. How can you embrace the impermanence of situations, relationships, or even your own emotions when things are going well? How often do you try to hold on to that moment, fearing that it might slip away? And when things are tough, do you find yourself fighting against the change, wishing things could be different? Zen teaches us that both the highs and the lows of life are temporary. By embracing impermanence, we can appreciate the present moment without attachment to it, and we can navigate difficult times with greater ease, knowing that change is a natural part of life. To practice embracing impermanence, begin by acknowledging that all things are in flux. When you find yourself resisting change, try to pause and reflect on the impermanent nature of the situation. Whether it's a joy or a sorrow, remind yourself that this moment will pass, and there is peace in accepting that truth. Instead of clinging to things, allow them to unfold naturally. This doesn't mean you stop caring or trying. It means that you trust the flow of life and accept that change is a part of the process. Finally, as we apply these Zen principles in our lives, it's important to remember the role of compassion for ourselves and others. Zen teaches us to approach life with a gentle heart, to cultivate kindness and empathy, especially during times of uncertainty or struggle. Compassion allows us to be present with others' suffering without judgment, and it reminds us to be kind to ourselves when we make mistakes or face setbacks. Consider how you can cultivate compassion in your own life. Are you patient with yourself when things don't go as planned? Do you offer kindness to others, especially in moments of difficulty? Compassion isn't about fixing others or always having the right answers. It's about being present, offering support, and simply listening with an open heart. When we practice compassion, we connect with others on a deeper level, and we create a sense of community and understanding. In summary, applying Zen in your life is about embracing the present moment, letting go of rigid expectations, and finding peace in impermanence. It's about being mindful of your thoughts, actions, and relationships, and practicing compassion for yourself and others. These Zen principles are not just theoretical concepts, they are practical tools that can help you live a more peaceful, balanced, and fulfilling life. The next time you find yourself overwhelmed by life's uncertainties, remember that peace is not found in control or perfection, but in the acceptance of what is. Like Alex, Maria, and the stone cutter, we can all learn to navigate life's challenges with greater grace by embracing Zen's timeless wisdom. When we stop fighting against the flow of life and start flowing with it, we discover a profound sense of peace and joy that is always available to us right here, right now. As we wrap up this journey through Zen wisdom, it's time to take what we've learned and apply it to our everyday lives. The teachings of Zen non-attachment, mindfulness, impermanence, and compassion are not just abstract concepts. They are powerful tools that can help us navigate the complexities and uncertainties of modern life with a sense of peace, resilience, and wisdom. Let's start by revisiting non-attachment and its practical applications. In a world that encourages us to define our worth by external achievements and possessions, it's easy to get caught up in the idea that we need to hold on to things in order to feel secure. We may cling to our careers, relationships, or personal goals, believing that they are the source of our happiness. But Zen teaches us that the key to peace lies in releasing our attachment to these things. This doesn't mean we stop caring or stop striving for success. It means we approach life with an open hand, ready to let go when necessary. To apply non-attachment in your life, start by noticing where you are holding on too tightly. Are there relationships that are draining you because you feel you must maintain them at all costs? Are you attached to a specific outcome in your career, hoping that a particular job or achievement will bring you fulfillment? Are there possessions or material things that you believe define your success or identity? Once you recognize these attachments, practice letting go. This doesn't mean abandoning your responsibilities or goals. It means releasing the need to control the outcome and allowing life to unfold naturally. Mindfulness is the next principle to integrate into your life. Mindfulness isn't just about meditating or sitting still. It's about being present in every moment. This can be particularly challenging in a world filled with distractions, phones, emails, social media, and constant multitasking. But mindfulness asks us to slow down, to tune into our thoughts, feelings, and physical sensations without judgment. By practicing mindfulness, we become more aware of our patterns, our reactions, and our emotions, allowing us to respond to situations with clarity rather than reactivity. To begin practicing mindfulness, try to incorporate it into your daily routine. You can start by simply paying attention to your breath as you go about your day. When you're walking, notice the sensation of your feet hitting the ground. When you're eating, savor each bite, paying attention to the flavors and textures. When you're talking to someone, be fully present in the conversation, giving them your full attention. By making mindfulness a part of your everyday life, you create space for peace, even in the busiest of moments. Next, let's consider impermanence, the realization that everything in life is constantly changing Nothing stays the same forever. This includes both the good and the bad. Zen teaches us that this fluidity is not something to fear, but something to embrace. Life's constant change is the natural rhythm of existence. When we resist change, we create suffering. But when we accept that everything is impermanent, we are freed from the need to control and hold on. We can experience life more fully, appreciating the fleeting beauty of each moment in your own life. Think about where you may be resisting change. Are there situations or relationships that you are holding on to out of fear of what might happen if you let go? Are there aspects of your life that you are trying to control, even though they are beyond your influence? Recognizing the impermanence of all things allows us to release the grip of fear and attachment. When we accept change as a natural part of life, we open ourselves to growth and new possibilities. Finally, compassion is the key to living with kindness and empathy, not just toward others, but toward ourselves. In a world that often emphasizes achievement and success, it's easy to overlook the importance of self-compassion. We may be quick to criticize ourselves for our mistakes or shortcomings, but Zen teaches us that compassion is a way of being, not just for others, but for ourselves as well. By practicing compassion, we not only foster deeper connection with others, but also create a more nurturing relationship with ourselves. To practice compassion, start by being kind to yourself. When you make a mistake or face a challenge, avoid harsh self-criticism. Instead, offer yourself the same kindness and understanding you would offer a friend. Recognize that everyone, including you, is doing their best with the tools they have in relationships. Practice empathy by truly listening to others, acknowledging their pain, and offering support without judgment. Compassion creates an atmosphere of trust and understanding, allowing us to connect more deeply with others and to ourselves. By integrating non-attachment, mindfulness, impermanence, and compassion into your daily life, you can begin to experience a deeper sense of peace and fulfillment. These Zen principles help us navigate life's uncertainties with grace and resilience. They remind us that we don't have to control everything, that we can find peace in the present moment, and that we are enough just as we are. Take a moment to reflect on the stories and teachings you've encountered in this exploration. How can you begin to apply Zen wisdom to your own life? What areas of your life are you ready to release attachment to? How can you practice mindfulness and embrace impermanence? And most importantly, how can you be more compassionate with yourself and others? These principles are not just teachings, they are pathways to a life of peace, joy, and deep connection. Zen reminds us that peace is not something we must search for outside ourselves. It is always available in the present moment. If we are willing to let go of our attachments and embrace the flow of life, life is a journey of learning, unlearning, and relearning. And through the practice of Zen, we find the wisdom to navigate that journey with calm and clarity, knowing that every moment is an opportunity for growth, for connection, and for peace.